Get started. Oh, perfect. Well, I'm really excited to be here for many reasons, not least of which is as a fellow alum, I recognize the importance of having a place to come to for support and resources, and sometimes a lot of advice on how we move through our careers. Plus, I love working with Nicole, who is amazing. And I love working with all of the people who joined the webinars. I did one last year, and it's really nice to be back and to see new faces, maybe some familiar ones. If you were at a prior one, it's nice to see you again. And, you know, January is a time where everyone talks about new goals, resolutions. It's a kind of past the time of reflection. December is the time for reflection and evaluation, and January is the time for new things and looking forward. I'm not so big on the timeline stuff and committing to a particular order of events, but I do recognize that there's a kind of energy and momentum that comes with the beginning of the year. So today we're going to talk about reprioritizing, reevaluating what we want, and really getting a sense of how we can create more alignment in how we pursue what we want and what we envision for our lives. As Nicole said, please feel free to drop in the chat any questions. If your chat is not currently saying to everyone, feel free to switch that up now. Drop in questions. I'm going to ask for things that are coming up for you along the way. I really want this to be interactive. And if at any point you have a question that you want to ask, but you don't feel comfortable asking it in front of everyone, that's totally okay. Feel free to send it directly to Nicole or to me, and we'll make sure that it gets asked even more anonymously. We won't call out any names either way. Okay, so Nicole shared a little bit about me and my background. Again, my name is Arielle Sadan. I am an executive coach. My company is called Reevaluate. We really focus on helping individuals and organizations build leadership, communication skills, confidence, growth orientation, and really create more alignment between the potential of the employees and the potential for the organization, creating kind of like a symbiotic relationship. That's kind of the goal. I got my BA at Tufts. I did my MBA at Tel Aviv University in Israel. I coach clients all over the world, from California to Australia to Europe and Africa, a few also in South America. I think the only continent I haven't touched yet is Antarctica, but I do have a client that's going to be there next week. So maybe if she's there for a session, I can count that. And yeah, if you have any questions about me, feel free to also drop those in the chat. I'm happy to answer those at any point. So today I kind of have three parts that I want to walk us through. The first is zooming out and trying to gauge how we can really identify if we're on the right path, if we're focusing on the right things. And I'll put right in big quotation marks because that's really subjective and it changes over time. And that's a whole nother conversation that we can talk about. Then I want to think about how we can identify what our options are to move forward on the path that is the best fit for us in this particular moment. And then finally, we'll talk about where to start, because it's all well and good to have an idea of where we want to go, but that can sometimes feel very overwhelming. And sometimes we just need to figure out what the first step is going to be. So that's kind of where we'll end there, and then we'll wrap up. So first and foremost, let's zoom out. It seemed from some of the comments that came in the beginning in the chat that a lot of you are looking for tips and tools. You're looking for validation and feeling motivated. So we're going to dive right into that. I'm a big believer in having clarity on what's important to us. I think it's kind of like the core thing that drives us, whether we know it or not. So I'm going to drop into the chat actually a PDF that you guys can download and print out. There's a little screenshot of it here, but in case you don't just want to read off of a screen, you can download it for yourself. I like to lead my clients through a values exercise. And what this is, it's a sheet full of values, all these words that have the potential to describe the things that are important to us. And usually I lead people through a couple of iterations. And as I'm talking, feel free to open up that document or take a look at your screen and start writing things down that stand out to you. I like this iterative process because going through this list and identifying, 5 to 10, 15 things that stand out as things that are important to us is a great place to start to get clarity on what we hold dear, what's important, what drives us, what do we want to work towards. For some people, it's, connection to nature or family or freedom, leadership. One of my core values is humor. So I like to incorporate the, jokes, levity, lightheartedness into all of the work that I do. Sometimes it lands, sometimes it doesn't land, but I try. And it feels like it comes, at least to me, quite naturally. I don't know if everyone would agree that I'm actually funny, but the humor is part of, how I try to live my life. So if you start thinking about this list, the 5 to 15 things that stand out, then look at that list, that shortened list, and see if you can narrow it down to 3 to 5 most important things to you. Now, Brene Brown, who came up with the handout that I shared, she tends to say that you should narrow it down to 2. I think that's really, really challenging. I think it's hard to pick just 2 things that you really want to live by, because we have so many things in our lives that are important to us: our career, our family, our friends, traveling, curiosity, humor, joy. All of these things are important. So if you can narrow it down, I think 3, 4, maybe 5 is a good target to start with. Now, I see some of you on video are going through this process. Maybe you're circling or writing things down for yourself. I love that. If you want, if you feel comfortable, drop them into the chat. Also, the people not on video who might be doing this kind of behind the screen, drop into the chat, what are the things that stand out as potentially your core values? And then hold on to those, keep them written down somewhere, and feel free to go through this exercise again and again. And I encourage people, once this video is posted on YouTube, to come back and revisit and maybe pause here to take a little bit more time to run through this exercise and some of the other exercises that I'm going to walk you through. Okay, anybody have, oh, I love it. Things are coming through. Accountability, adventure, and openness. I love that. Those are wonderful. And I feel like there's some interplay in there: adventure, openness, there's a curiosity, getting out there into the world that I love. Keep those coming in. Authenticity, connection, belonging, collaboration, joy, impact. I love these. Okay, keep thinking about your core values, keep dropping them in the chat. These are beautiful. Okay, now we've figured out what's the kind of core way that we want to show up, the things that are most important. These are going to infuse so much of how we show up in the world and what we seek out, what kinds of opportunities we seek out. And if you see my eyes darting around the screen, it's because I see all of you on one side, and maybe I'll just move you into the center so that I am seeing you more closely to where my presentation is. Our values are important, are really important as sort of guiding principles. We also have these other things that come up for us, which are our priorities, right? How do we support our lifestyle? How do we allocate our time? Where do we want to live in the world? Do we want more flexibility or more structure? Do we want to have a role at work that aligns with, one particular area of interest for us? Or do we want to be more of a generalist? Do we want to commit ourselves to a mission or a particular type of impact? Or Are we focused more on financial stability or wealth building, things like that, right? So what are the things that you want to prioritize in your life? The way I also sometimes think about priorities is like looking for an apartment in New York City. You can have a big apartment in a great location, but it probably won't be a reasonable budget. Or you can have it in your price point in a great location, but it's going to be a hole in the wall, right? Really, really tiny. You probably can't have all three at once. We have to prioritize and figure out what are the things that we're willing to compromise on, kind of like the must-haves versus the nice-to-haves. So if you can start making a list of the things that are important to you to prioritize in your life, then can you figure out what are the must-haves versus the negotiables? Now, a lot of times my clients come to me and they say salary is a really high priority. Totally understandable, very reasonable. And it's something that's important to us. I mean, let's be real, money drives everything, maybe not everything, but it makes a lot of things easier. So maybe you have a minimum salary that is your priority, your high priority, your must have, and then maybe there's a nice to have kind of range. So there are ways that you might even be able to break down your priorities, even within the must-haves and the nice-to-haves, to make sure that you're still able to fulfill the things that are important and fulfill your lifestyle requirements, support the causes and the people and the relationships in your life, with some flexibility. I'll say that. If you know the things that are important to you, and I have some ideas of things that you can consider up on the screen, but if you know what those are, if you feel comfortable sharing, feel free to drop those in the chat. You know, you don't have to necessarily have to share your salary requirements, but a lot of my clients prioritize, for example, location where they want to live, if they are willing to move or not willing to move. I recently had a client who was dead set on moving to Denver to be closer to nature. Nature became one of his core values, and so Denver was the place to do it. I think I saw that there's someone in Denver, maybe even a couple. Hi. And so, you know, for him, building a life around Denver became the priority. So that's an example of how we can prioritize different things, and how we might get clarity on what's really important to us. Okay, now is kind of like the creative moment. I want you to close your eyes if you feel comfortable, or just kind of let your brain relax. Maybe take a really deep breath in and a deep breath out. Maybe another deep breath in and a deep breath out. And I want you to think about some point in the future, maybe 6 months out, maybe a year, 2 years, 10 years, you pick. Pick a point in your future that hasn't happened yet. And try and look around. Where are you? Are you in your home, outside, in a city or in the forest, by the ocean? Are you with people, by yourself, with a dog, with a partner, with kids? Who's there with you? What kind of feelings is future you feeling? Are you feeling energized, grounded, motivated, excited, balanced, maybe even nervous, or maybe the adrenaline is pumping. You're about to do something scary and new. Maybe you just accomplished the biggest thing in your career. What's coming up? And if you have a pen nearby, even if your eyes are still closed, start writing down all of these things. Just let it flow. What comes up for you when you think about your future? Where do you want to be going? And I invite you to take an extra minute or two here to really allow yourself the space to create that vision and try and find where those strong outlines are. Where are things really in focus? Where are things maybe a little blurry that you want to zoom into and create more clarity around? And what feels so clear that like you can really almost taste it? And make sure you remind yourself, what timeline are you working with here? How far out did you go? And then hold on to that. Now, I'm going to invite everybody, if your eyes are closed, to start opening them. Keep writing down any notes that you're taking. But I'm going to move us on for the sake of time. But come back to this, because I think that sometimes we forget to take stock of where we want to be in a really open and creative and non-judgmental space. So come back to this later. And I'm going to invite you all to put all of that on the side for 1 second, because we're going to come back to it. And look at where you are right now. In your current role, since we are primarily focusing on career here, but this can be applicable for all areas of your life. But primarily at your role, your company, your team, the lifestyle that you have right now, what values would you say are most prominently represented? Is it career? Is it teamwork? Is it family? Is it curiosity and adventure, impact? What's represented here? And then I want you to think about, what are the primary markers of success for this role or for this company that you're working with, or even for the team that you're on, if your team has its own distinct culture, right? Some primary markers of success are, promotion or salary, bonuses at the end of the year. Is it visibility within your organization, praise, whatever it is? How do you know that you or the people around you are successful? What makes them stand out? And lastly, if you were to change absolutely nothing, just stay on the trajectory that you're at right now, at this role, at this company, nothing changes. Where would this lead you to be in 5 to 10 years? Right? Kind of having like a, what's that movie? Sliding doors moment for ourselves. Right? If you changed absolutely nothing and made no big changes, didn't leave, didn't start something new, didn't, all stayed the same, and you stayed on the path that you're on, right? Assuming that it leads to promotions and growth and whatever, where does it end up? Maybe you know, maybe you don't, maybe there are still open question marks, especially for people who are starting new roles, right? Maybe you don't know what the trajectory could be at your current company or on your team. But if you have a general sense, you can look around the people who you work with, your managers, their managers, and you can kind of gauge, where does this lead? And then I want you to take a step back from all those notes that you just took about where you're at right now, and look at all the stuff that you came up with already about your core values and your priorities and what you want for your future. And see where there's a Venn diagram. Where is there overlap? Where is there alignment? and what stays in their respective circles. If there's no overlap and no alignment, we're going to talk about that. If there's a lot of alignment, a lot of overlap, this role, this company, this team is really leading you to where you envisioned yourself. That's awesome. It's not very common, but that's amazing. And we're still going to keep going because I bet there's still going to be things that we're going to talk about that are going to be helpful. And I'm curious if you guys feel comfortable sharing either to everybody, or if you want just to me or to Nicole, sharing, like if you could rate the alignment or divergence. One is there, like, I'm on the totally wrong path. My company, my role, this is totally different from what I envisioned myself. And 10 is this is perfect alignment. I'm doing exactly what I want. That's going to get me where I want to go. There's so much alignment, core values, priorities, everything is in sync. Drop a number in the chat. 1, super not aligned. 10 is I'm on the right track. We're in alignment. I'm curious to see what people, we already got a 1. 7, that sounds pretty good. 5, 4, 4. Okay, lots of mid ranges. Not aligned 4, 7. We got some alignment 5. I appreciate the openness. It's not always easy to admit when maybe we need some change. Okay. So especially for those who are feeling like there isn't a ton of alignment, what can you do, right? What are your options? Where do you go from here when you realize that there's maybe not a lot of overlap, or maybe not as much overlap as you might like, right? For those of you who gave higher numbers, I saw a few 7s come through. What are your options? That's where brainstorming comes in, which I love, because in brainstorming, there are no wrong answers. You cannot come up with an option that is incorrect because it's just a creative exercise. We're just going to brain dump a little bit. So if you've got a piece of paper, you've got some Post-its. I love working with Post-its. I have 7 million of them all over my desk, and I do a weekly clean out to make sure that it stays organized, but that's a desk organization is a whole other webinar. Start jotting down ways that you can create more alignment with your future vision, with your core values, with your priorities, right? And some of those things might look like things that you can do relatively easily, right? Things within your current role or where you're at right now. Are there certain projects that you want to get involved with at work, or hobbies that you want to pick up outside of work to experiment with new skills, or build a new community, or change up the way that your values are showing up in your life? Right? Maybe there are people at work that you want to work more closely with because you can learn something from them. Or maybe you want to switch roles within your company. Are there things that you can get involved with internally that can give you a little bit more access to the values, priorities, and vision that you have for your future and for what you want? Or is the divergence so extreme that it just makes sense to start looking for something completely new, in which case you've got a good foundation to help guide your search? You can also think about ways to refocus your priorities, right? If one of your priorities is working towards a promotion or growth, let's say, can you find ways to build up your strengths even more, or strengthen or fill some of the gaps that you know that you have? If your priorities are around financial planning and stability, maybe you can change up your budgeting, right? That's an option to shift some of the way that you're showing up right now and turn it into the way that you want to show up for future you. And again, how can you set up your lifestyle to express the priorities and the values that you hold dear to you, right? Investing time in hobbies, family, friends, doing the things that bring you closer to the way that you want to show up. Now, in an ideal world, we would come up with, 20, 30 different things that you can try, and we'd have a ton of different Post-its or bullets or whatever it is all over the place. So again, come back to this video, revisit, take the time, and continue the brainstorming. And for what it's worth, you can make that a live, living document that you continuously come back to. But at a certain point, you have to filter out and get like real. I don't love the word realistic because it implies that we can't be creative, but find the things that actually make sense. So some things are immediate no's, right? We already know, it doesn't make sense to, quit my job and move to Denver without any sort of backup plan. It's not realistic. We're not going to do that. Fair enough. It's an option. It might not be the right option for right now, and it might not make sense, right? Maybe you have kids that are in school, you can't pull them out. Maybe you have a job that you are contractually obligated to. Maybe you have a parent that you need to take care of. Maybe your partner's job is I'm in New York, and you can't move right now. So quitting everything and leaving doesn't make sense. We can cross it off for now. So that's like a first phase filtration. Then you can start thinking about what could make sense potentially, right? Maybe it's not immediate no, but it might not be an immediate yes either. And start marking those down, maybe with a question mark, or if you want to color code or whatever kind of system works for you. And just mark those down, see what comes up. And of those things that could make sense, what then do you actually want to do or to try? What gets some, bubbles of excitement or curiosity or intrigue or energy? Or what scares you? Sometimes the things that scare us because we know that they could be so right, so exciting if we allowed ourselves to take that leap and do them. Sometimes. So what's left of that list of all those brainstorming options? What's left that you actually want to try to do, or actually want to do or try? So you don't try to do things, do or do not. There is no try, right? That's what Yoda told us. So what do you actually want? And that's what's left. Which brings us then to figuring out what's the first step? What's next? How do we actually create some alignment between where we are and where we want to go now that we have a few options to help us move in that direction? So first, we want to define what we actually want, right? What are the goals that we have for ourselves? And we might take them from that initial vision that we came up with for our future. We might take that from some of the priorities that came up. We might take that from the values that we want to live into more. But what are some of the ways that we can actually set clear, defined goals for ourselves around everything that we've talked about so far? Now, we're going to dive much deeper into goal setting at the end of February, so come join us for that webinar. But in the meantime, right, one of the most popular or common goal setting techniques is SMART goals, and that stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based, right? And this is a way to make high-level, kind of vague hopes into really tangible, tactical goals that we can work towards. It's just one way. I sometimes think it can be really useful to start with this. Sometimes they morph, but think about how you can take the visions that you've created for yourself today and turn them into really tangible, actionable goals. And then we get to plan, right? Can we then think about how we can take some of these goals, put them into, or break them down rather, into action steps, put some deadlines on those things and start doing them, right? And the thing that I'll call out here is plans, roadmaps, deadlines. Sometimes we have a tendency, and I say we because I include myself, and I say we because royal we, everyone that I work with, and I've worked with like thousands of people at this point, and they all have a tendency to do this. So it is a generalization. We have a tendency to assume that things will happen faster than they actually take. So we assume we don't give ourselves enough time to do things, and then we feel bad when they don't take as short a time as we thought they would take. So I'm going to invite you to create deadlines for yourself, create those plans, but also be flexible with how those things actually get done, right? Hold yourself accountable and create accountability structures, but also recognize that sometimes things don't go exactly as we plan or exactly as we hope. Just putting that out there as a general caveat around planning. Once you have a general idea of what the plan might look like, I say might because it'll shift probably as you go through these steps, and it's an iterative process. Figure out what's most urgent and what's highest impact, right? The things that are really urgent are the things that maybe other people need to know about, or the things that really can't wait. One of the items that comes up a lot when my clients are setting new goals as urgent is, what information do you need in order to take action? Kind of like what's your starting point? I have a lot of clients that work towards promotions, and they don't actually know what the criteria are for a promotion. That's an urgent need, right? That information will help them figure out what's their starting point and what they're actually working towards. And then we have those high impact tasks, right? Especially things that might not be as high intensity, but very high impact, right? Getting particular information, letting people know that you're thinking about moving to Denver, right? Sharing that goal with your spouse or with your children or with your parents. Those are probably going to have a big impact on the way that your goals and actions take shape. So that could be important. The other piece I'll say is if some of your goals might require some financial component, high impact tasks and urgent tasks might also involve, I'll say, getting more awareness around how much things cost, how much you want to save, and how you can plan effectively to make sure that financially you're in a place to accomplish those goals in the timeline that you're hoping for. So once we have this plan, and again, flexible plan, it's important to have structures and people around us who can help us stay on track. One of the things that is oftentimes really helpful is feedback. Now, if you're planning on leaving your job, you might not want to tell your boss that you're planning on leaving until you have another offer. Just generally, unless you have a really close personal relationship with them and you feel very comfortable. Even then, I would say that might be a gray area. But if you are looking to make changes in how your role is structured, or you want to shift internally within the company, or you want to move and relocate to another state or another city, those are things that you can share and get feedback on, right? I have talked to many clients about how they can share with their managers that they want to relocate to a different place where maybe there isn't an office, right? I want to move to Denver. How can we make that happen? How can we work together to make sure that this is feasible, right? Is my timeline, 6 months maybe, is that reasonable for the company? Can I get feedback on my goal, and maybe we can work together to realign our expectations? So that's an example of how you might be able to seek feedback, right? Or if you, well, I would say be mindful of who you seek feedback from, and be mindful of how many people you're seeking feedback from, right? The people whose feedback you want are the people who are going to help build you up, who will support you and help create additional building blocks and structure and stability as you build towards your goal. Oftentimes what happens is we share our goals or our priorities or our wishes with anybody and everybody. Our parents, our friends, our acquaintances, and more often than not, at least one person says, why would you want to do that? That's crazy. That's a stupid idea. That sucks. That's a really horrible feeling to come to someone and be vulnerable and share what we are hoping for our lives and have them tear it down. We don't want that. I don't want that for you. And I know you don't want that feeling because we've all experienced it at least once, is my guess. So be mindful of who you're sharing your goals with, and be mindful of how you're asking for feedback, right? You're allowed to say, hey, I have this big idea. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm really looking for, positive validation, or I'm looking for ideas about how I can make this happen. I don't really need to hear that it's crazy. I don't need to hear that it's too big or that it's impossible. I need to hear how you might help me, or what you think I can do to make it happen. So seek feedback, but be mindful about how you're doing it. Again, be flexible. Things come up, things get sidetracked. That's okay. It's part of the process. Allow yourself to refocus. And then let yourself reevaluate. So often we are so singularly focused on a goal that we forget why we're doing it. I've heard from numerous people, clients and friends and children of clients, who, for instance, want to go to medical school. They decide in high school, they saw an episode of Grey's Anatomy, or they went to the ER and they were fascinated and they want to become a doctor. And they work tirelessly and they're so single-minded about going to medical school. And then they go to medical school and they've been training for 15 years. And then they finish medical school and they go to their first day on the job at the hospital and they hate it. Hate it. They faint at the sight of blood. They hate the hospital system. They don't like working with patients. Everything about the medical system, everything about health in general, they hate it. They don't actually want to be a doctor anymore. The missing piece is that they forgot to reevaluate whether or not this was something that they still wanted to do. And so I encourage you to reevaluate regularly whether or not you're still on track for what you want, and what you want may change. This happens a lot, after big life events, right? You think you want to go to medical school, or you think you want to be a partner at your law firm, and then you have kids, and all of a sudden you don't care so much about title and you care more about flexibility and work-life balance. Or maybe you have kids and all of a sudden you really care about making that year-end bonus to make sure that you can afford to send them to college, right? And that encourages you to go for partner. So there are all these big things that will come up and shift and shape how we think about our goals. So reevaluate. You're allowed to change your mind. So different intervals are helpful, right? After big projects, I always love telling people to, do a little debrief with yourself. What skills did I learn? What knowledge did I gain? What kind of experience did I get from this? And what do I want to do next? Is the next thing from here still aligned with my values and with my priorities? All right, do that like mini debrief with yourself. I also love putting check-ins on the calendar, right? Some people like to do it weekly, some people monthly. I think at least once a quarter or every 6 months is a great cadence to just know that you have half an hour, or even more if you want to take it, to think back, reflect on the last quarter, the last 6 months, and then think about how you want to move things forward. Make sure that you're still in alignment with yourself and see if things have shifted, which is also totally fair. And then before big decisions or big changes, right? Before or just after big life events, if they were unpredictable, before you take that promotion or before you make that big job change, before you move to Denver, just like you thought, just check in with yourself and make sure that you still feel that same sense of drive and excitement and enthusiasm, and that it's still aligning with your priorities and your values. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. And I'm really excited to check in with all of you and hear what's resonating, what's sticking, what questions you have. So I just want to wrap up with a few final thoughts. First and foremost, this is an iterative process, right? I tried to kind of hammer that idea home throughout. We have to be flexible with ourselves because we change our minds, we change, our circumstances change. And so this is an iterative process. Don't be afraid to iterate, to change, to throw things out, to start things over, to recognize that you are a different person than you might have been when you first started this process, right? I'm not the same person I was when I graduated from college and I had certain goals at that point. And I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago when I first started this business. Right? I've changed as a person. My priorities have shifted. My values have shifted. And the way that I show up in the world has shifted. So my goals are going to shift in accordance. That's part of being human and moving through a changing world. We can't predict that. So let yourself be flexible and iterate in this process. And also don't be afraid to be kind to yourself. Because when things don't go the way that we want them to, like I said, we have a tendency to be really hard on ourselves. This is all part of being human, right? We're in a learning process every single day. And so if things don't go to plan, that's okay. Can we be kind and gentle with ourselves and allow ourselves the space, the kindness, the grace, the mercy to adjust as needed and to give ourselves credit for how far we've come? Which brings me into this point, which I think is so important. And oftentimes I forget it myself, right? While we're looking forward and thinking about what we want for the future, don't forget to look back. And I always think about this acronym, ACT, right? Appreciate how far you've come, celebrate your wins and your accomplishments, and create transparency around both of those things, right? Let other people in, let them know what you've been working on, let them celebrate with you. And also let them advocate for you as you move forward and try and, make progress towards your end goals. And ultimately, don't forget that this is a process, right? And like anything else, we can only do things one step at a time. So don't put the cart before the horse. I've done it. It doesn't work. We can only take things one step at a time. I have a big Post-it on the wall right next to my computer that literally says one step at a time because I tend to bite off more than I can chew. I know I'm not alone in that. And so I have to remind myself that all the time. Remind yourself of that also. Things just sometimes take time and we can only bite things off one bite at a time. What is it? You have to eat an elephant one bite at a time, but I hate that because we're jumbos, right? Like we don't eat elephants. So we can only take things one step at a time. We'll stick with that metaphor. And with that, just a quick reminder, I know Nicole mentioned it, we're going to be doing goal setting in February. We're doing leading with influence in March. And then for any of you who are thinking about joining the reunion, I will be there. So I look forward to hopefully meeting some of you in person. And I'm going to open the floor for any questions that come up. questions, thoughts, ideas, things that you want to share, if something resonated with you in particular, I'd love to hear it. I'm happy to answer any specific individual things that maybe are just about you if you want. We've got I don't know, 10-ish minutes. Yeah, go for it.
I guess it's like something that I've been like really grappling with, particularly when it comes to moving, like getting a job and putting yourself out there, setting these new goals is one thing in itself. It's a huge transition. But then when you see that perfect job and then you're like, well, I have to move. Moving is not an easy thing to do.
No.
And so is there any kind of advice or thoughts that you can, or feedback that you can give to sort of help me wrap my mind around that like two transitions, two big ones is okay? And yes, it's scary, but it's okay. Is there anything you can add to that or share?
I think it's a great question because it's a challenging. It's challenging to make any changes. Let's put it this way, right? Whether it's trying to implement a new habit and go to the gym, or make a big shift like starting a new job, or making a double big shift like starting a new job in a new place. Right? Those are all hard. Change is hard. I think a lot of it ends up coming down to your priorities, right? And I hear this from people a lot. I always ask the people that I work with, especially when they're thinking about making a job change, how set are you on staying in the place that you live right now? Because that becomes an anchor. And sometimes thinking about anchors is helpful, right? Anchors can sink us, but they can also stabilize us. So if you are prioritizing your career growth and this role feels so amazing and aligned, and it's kind of like the opportunity that you want, then maybe geography doesn't need to be an anchor for you right now. Or on the flip side, if geography is an anchor, then maybe that isn't the right role for you because it's not actually meeting your needs. So I think there's a little bit of opportunity there to figure out, where you want to put your emphasis right now, whether it's on the role or on the geography, because apartments come and go, homes come and go. If there are other factors, right, like a partner or kids, it becomes much more complicated. The right role and the right company will support you in that transition, I tend to think. And so if you have that clarity around what you're doing, why you're doing it, what's kind of the end outcome that you're striving towards, then moving is challenging, but it's logistical. Ultimately, if your family is, if you live next door to your family and that's such a big priority and that's really, your top priority to keep that, then finding a role that helps you maintain those priorities is going to be more beneficial to you in the long run than going and moving and leaving that thing that is so important to you, for however long. Eventually, sometimes, not always, I really don't want to generalize, but sometimes when we do those big things and we forget what the core values and priorities are, we will burn out because we don't have those things that keep us grounded and keep us happy and joyful. And my family is really important to me, and I moved away for a year and a half and I thought I would be okay with it. And then when I came back, I was so much calmer and grounded and clear on how I can grow my career than I was, living my European fantasy life that I thought I wanted for so long. So, I think first and foremost, get clarity around what's most important to you right now. The logistics are stressful, but they're logistics. And if that's all they are, then great. That sounds like a wonderful opportunity. If there's more there, if it's an anchor, if it's a priority, then it might not be the best opportunity for you because it doesn't allow you to keep the things close to you that you want.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you for that question. Here's I don't know if this is a comment or a question, but I want to call it out. It says, I've read that it is okay to fail, especially if you learn, but we naturally feel the opposite. If that's a question, I'll just comment on it really quickly. Failure, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I was a gold star kid, so I loved getting gold stars in school. I was really validated with good grades, and it made it really challenging for me to enjoy learning if I wasn't getting things right. So I was kind of in that mindset that failure is bad and failure means you're stupid and only dumb kids fail. And that's like the worst mentality ever, because it's just so wrong. And I think part of what I've grappled with and what I really work on with my clients is reframing failure, because it's not bad. Like, what is failure? What is success? It's so subjective, because a kid who fails out of college but then starts a multi-million-dollar startup, is he a failure or is he successful? Right? Someone who, got fired from their job, failed, but then ended up, on the Forbes 30 under 30, and that's successful, right? It's so subjective. So I think if we can reframe how we think about what failure is, we can also reframe our relationship to what it says about us, or rather what it doesn't say about us. Getting a bad grade, or having a bad day, or getting yelled at, or getting hard feedback, whatever failure is, what triggers you to feel like you're failing, it can be hurtful and it's allowed to hurt. But then I think the learning is going to be the thing. Can we enjoy learning what went wrong or what could have gone better, so that we can just do that and make that the natural go-to? Or maybe it wasn't us. I mean, so many times I'll share this little tidbit, and I don't usually share a lot about my prior failures as a consultant, but I am a very people-oriented person. You put me in front of a group of people, like, I love this. This lights me up. It makes me so happy. As a management consultant, I loved meeting with my team. I loved meeting with the client. I was really, really bad at Excel, which is kind of like the first thing that you have to do as a consultant, is do all the data churning. I was really bad at it. And I got so much feedback about how I needed to improve my Excel skills. It was infuriating. I felt so horrible about myself all the time. I felt like a failure. I'm a horrible consultant. I'm a failure. I'm never going to get promoted. It's the worst. Turns out I was just in the wrong role. I wasn't meant to be a data churning consultant. I was meant to be an executive coach, working with clients and empowering people and doing the things that come naturally to me. So did I fail as a consultant? Sure, maybe. But that failure created so much more clarity for me around where I could really shine and where I can create a career that was so much more in alignment with my strengths and my values and how I want to show up for other people and for myself. That, yes, I failed, but I'm so much happier now. So yes, failure is okay. Yes, we can learn from it. And I think it's an opportunity to also reevaluate, why do we feel like we failed, and what are the things that we can take away to build more clarity and alignment for how we want to move forward. Any other questions before? I mean, I know we're just at the end of time, so if anyone needs to drop off, that's totally understandable. But if anyone has any last minute questions, we can try and squeeze them in. Right, Nicole?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But if not, I'll also drop my my LinkedIn and email into the chat if anybody wants to send any questions my way or reach out. So you can feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. And I'm excited to see what you all come up with, and hopefully we'll see you in February.
Thank you so much. I'm already reevaluating. Thank you to the participants today for joining us. You'll receive a survey through email. Fill it out. It helps us. It helps me. Join us in February. I put the link in the chat box. You can find that on the Alumni and Friends event website as well. And yes, thanks. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.